What's up, guys? Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of Eat, Train, Prosper. I believe this is episode actually 86, Brian. It's crazy to think that it has been going on for this long. It seems really just like kind of yesterday we were having the conversation about starting it, and here we are, coming up on 2 years, I think, in a couple months, and this far deep. But we are talking a little bit of a follow-up episode to last week's episode where we were talking about just kind of some hindsight in our training careers. So today we are going to talk about, I don't think I could really use the word eating careers, but what we're terming nutrition through the years, just to give a little bit of insight into kind of how Bryan and I found ourselves here, and just to share a little bit more around where we were at our different kind of respective eras or phases through, and how we ultimately found ourselves here. As always, before we jump into today's topic, Bryan, can you kick us off with some updates?
Yeah, for sure. I think it says this is episode 87, so you may be underwhelming us by an episode. But either way, I know we took a couple weeks off here and there for different things. So January, either way, January 1 will definitely be 2 years for us, which is pretty cool. And we're now averaging, well into the thousands on downloads per week, which is also really cool too, because that was one of our kind of initial goals. So I'm super happy about that. But either way, I guess my big update for today, I have a few, but the big one is I did get the PRP in my knee last Tuesday. So 1 week from before this episode was recorded, and I guess 2 weeks before this episode airs is when I got PRP. And it was extremely excruciatingly painful for about 3 to 5 minutes after completion. And that was the thing that I think surprised me the most. The doctor told me that the first 3 to 5 minutes were going to be really painful, but I don't know that I could have possibly been prepared for feeling like there was so much fluid in my kneecap that it felt like my kneecap was going to literally pop off for a few minutes. I remember just like sitting there in the bed with an ice pack on it after he finished, and he's like, I'll check you back in like 5 minutes, just try to chill out, and like big breaths and like squeezing my hands and like just trying to get through the pain. It was awful. Do you remember feeling similarly?
Yeah, I do actually. And now I kind of feel like a dick for not saying that, or maybe I shouldn't have said anything, but
it was better. Yeah.
Yeah. To the point where I was like, I don't know. I think something's wrong. Right. Or it's just like, it's a small area that there's not really room for all the fluid that gets injected. And it's just like intense pressure.
Yeah. That's how I would describe it as well. So literally 3 to 5 minutes later, it's like it kind of went down to like a 3 out of 10 pain. And then it kind of just hung out there for a couple days. I feel, and I don't want to blame this on my doctor, but I feel like I was slightly misled in how I was to handle the period after the PRP, in that he told me, like, he definitely did say avoid, most activity for a week. To his credit. But he also said the main thing is just avoiding anything that takes you more than a 3 out of 10 pain. So in my mind, I maybe just heard the second part and didn't hear the don't do activity for a week thing. And so I was like, well, as long as it's under a 3 out of 10, I can do whatever. And so I think basically what happened is I had this trip planned to go to Estes Park solo, which is kind of what I do for my birthday each year. I like to take a trip into the mountains and have a day of like hiking away from the family and just kind of have like an introspective period to reflect on the year and things like that. So this year I'd planned on Estes Park and doing like this big hike. I didn't really think about the fact that it was going to be 5 days after my PRP. So I had already had the trip booked and everything like that. I ended up doing the hike anyways. It was over 1,000-foot vertical. It was like 2.5 hours, 4 miles round trip. And on the way back down, my knee just started talking to me. I wouldn't say it was more than a 3 out of 10, but it was certainly closing in on that 3 out of 10 range. And then I finished the hike and it stiffened up a lot after I stopped moving. And I would say at that point, it was a good solid 3 out of 10. So I started having all these like negative feelings, wondering if like, hey, this doesn't feel right. Like, did I work too hard? Should I not have done this? Started getting on Google, which is never a good idea when you have a condition. And all these websites basically saying that any activity that compresses the joint in the first 5 to 14 days of the PRP, especially the first 5 days. The term they used was render it useless. And I was like literally in a state of freaking out kind of, because I was like, man, I just went through all of this. And what if I have rendered this useless? The rationale being that the platelets can't attach if the joint is compressed. And so you really want to leave that joint kind of unstressed for the first 5 days so the platelets can attach and start doing their work. And then after 5 days, they've mostly attached and you're pretty good from there. So anyway, I still kind of feel like I don't know if I rendered it useless. I'm a little bit down about it. The pain from the hike persisted for 2 days after, and it's just literally last night before bed and then into this morning that it's finally started to feel like it's improving again. So I'll keep everyone updated to see if maybe, I screwed this up permanently and it just won't work now, which would be a shame. But at least my hope is that it gets back to where it was at a minimum, because I've heard horror stories online of people doing activity too early and then their joint ends up being unstable for eternity, basically, until they either get PRP again or surgery. So I have a bit of trepidation on the whole thing, but I'm confident and optimistic that hopefully it's going to be okay, especially now that it's starting to feel a little bit better. So that's my big update. And I have a few smaller ones that can follow that. How about you? I know you're leaving Bali here shortly.
I leave by the time this episode comes out. I will be back in the States. I leave on Thursday, like midday. We start.
Okay.
We head up to Jakarta because we could get better flight options out of Jakarta, which is like the capital of Indonesia. And then we fly. First flight is to, I want to say Dubai. And then we have like a few hour layover in Dubai. And then we fly into Dulles in DC.
Cool.
I'm excited kind of for the travel day, just for something like different. Like I feel like travel days are where I get to like break my rules. I'll just have coffee like whenever, because I'm like, I got a 10-hour flight and like a 14-hour flight. Like it is what it is. So definitely excited to like hit a Starbucks, as kind of corny as that sounds, and just get like a straight, dark roast black coffee. I'm going to do some work on the flight as well. And then I'm buying a book to read, and then I'll have like a couple show series things to watch. I mean, it's a lot of sitting in one spot, over those 3 flights. I'm at like over 20 hours, well over 20 hours. So
at least they have great entertainment options on those international flights.
Yeah. And that's kind of the reason, like, we've done enough of it now. Like, anytime we're flying big across the world, we're pretty much going to fly like Emirates or Qatar, even though it's generally going to be a little bit more expensive. It's just there's no bullshit. Like, as much as I fucking hate to say it, like flying the American Airlines, not specifically American, but like the
United or like,
hands down the fucking worst, like across the board, the absolute worst. So once I learned that, I was like, oh, this is a game changer now, what I know to look for, which is the opposite of what you may otherwise would kind of think. But yeah, excited for that. I'm excited to be back in the States. We'll be back in the States for like 10 to 12 weeks before returning to Bali. See my family. One of my friends is getting married. That's like that was like the catalyst for us planning around this. So I'll be back in the Pennsylvania area for that. So that's kind of like the biggest update. So getting rid of things, scrambling around, tying bits in. But my fun update is I hit my hack squat goal today.
Yes.
So I got my 10 reps at 180 kilos, which is double the reps that I ended my strength block with, which was 15 weeks ago. And then I had a period in the middle where I didn't train. I had the metabolic phase in the middle where I didn't train the hack squat for like 4 weeks. So that's been super, super cool because it's like a very like cut and dry progression right there.
Yep. Did you get video?
I have video. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. One of my friends, Matt, was here with me and we actually trained together today. And then I made sure I pushed it like pretty good because I had him there to spot me. And then I was going to take an 11th attempt because it was moving like okay, but my core broke down on the 10th one. And that's like kind of when I know like it's going to be, if that's buckling, it's going to go into like low back and different things. It's kind of just not worth it.
Hip flexion, a little more hip flexion there.
Yeah. So I'm really, really excited about that. That was my big one.
Well, I don't know if you have a YouTube channel, but if you don't, I can throw it up on my YouTube channel if the people want to see.
I do have a YouTube channel actually that I don't really ever use. It'll go on my Instagram and stuff, so I'll put
Okay.
something on there. But yeah, I might throw it over on YouTube or whatever too.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm hyped to watch it. Good stuff, dude. Congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Well, quick finishing updates for me. Initially, I spoke last week about, with this PRP happening, that I was going to train my right quad and not my left and just do hamstring work as normal. And I've kind of just decided that I'm not going to train my right quad. It's already bigger than my left quad is per my DEXA scan a month ago. And so I'm just going to take this time to not train quads for a few weeks. We'll use it as like a quad resensitization phase, and it'll keep me from being, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for here? Too neurotic, maybe. So I'm just going to stop training quads. And when I have leg days, they're just going to be hamstring days for right now, and abs. Maybe I'll actually train abs. So I think I have another week and a half, maybe 2 weeks of not training quads. And then they want me to start doing some like light single leg extensions. So I'll add those in. And then maybe by week 3 or 4, I'll be doing some like light goblet squats, or fuck, in my case, maybe it's just like an empty carriage pendulum squat or something like that. So that's my plan there. And let's see what else is coming up. Kim is leaving me for 5 days in 2 days. So the day that you leave for the day before you leave for the US, she'll be leaving for Mexico for a yoga retreat with a couple of her girls. So I have 5 days coming up of double dad duty. We'll see how workouts fit into this whole thing. The kids' school is also closed on Friday, which is like, they just have like this random closure day for no reason. Like it's a Boulder Montessori like reunion professional development day or something. So I'm like, sweet, glad I'm solo dadding on the day where there's no school. So Friday should be fun. Yes, sir.
Kind of related, kind of unrelated. Are the kids in a Montessori school?
Yes, they are.
Okay,
Yeah.
we will have a conversation offline about this actually, but
Okay.
I'm very excited to talk about it.
All right, sweet. Yeah, I grew up in a Waldorf school, which is somewhat similar to Montessori. So when that was presented as an option here when we first moved to Boulder, that was something that we were pretty into. So
cool.
You know what? I'll save this next topic for next week. We'll tease it, but rep ranges and the idea of 6 through 30 reps being equal across the board, and my preference for lower reps and kind of why. So we can cover that. Maybe that'll be like a half topic for next week or something along those lines, because I think it's gotten a bit of focus in the Instagram these days.
Yeah, I think let's slate that up for next week too, because I have my kind of preferential feelings around that, and we'll have a great open discussion about it. I'm interested to hear more about yours too.
Yep, sounds good. Well, that's really all I have for updates then.
Cool. I guess the last one. Oh, I always forget to talk about this, and it's really, really silly because we just get into it. You guys can kind of tell I'm probably not a great marketer at heart. I have coaching roster slots available. So I have a couple of really great clients who've been with me for a very long time, wrapping up as we've wrapping up like huge fat loss phases and those sorts of things. So those guys will kind of go into maintenance. Some of them fade off into the sunset, which means that I have roster availability. So you can check my website, strakernutritionco.com. I have some information on there. There's an application on there. You can obviously DM me on Instagram. And then by the time this launches, I will have one slot open in my coaching capabilities container. It is a mentorship for new or existing coaches in the space who would like to improve their coaching service fulfillment delivery side of things. So we're focusing everything on the back end and then improving your systems. And I give you all of my systems and the things that I use to run Straker Nutrition Co. So it's always very small group, 2-hour weekly calls, bring lots of value sort of thing. So reach out just email me or DM me for more details on that for that final slot. And that is my coaching pitch right there. Bryan, would you like to plug any Paragon stuff while we're at it?
No, but I'm ready to sign up for your coaching. That was amazing.
Perfect.
No, so I don't have any Paragon stuff to plug, but I did just get hit up by a 16-year-old kid named Oliver from Sweden. And he and his mom actually hit me up collaboratively
Probably for the
because
best.
they're interested in my coaching one-on-one. This kid has been training for 6 or 8 months, and we had a really cool consult call. I actually don't officially have any like one-on-one coaching spots open at the moment, but I'm going to take him on just because this is it's somewhat of a new experience for me. Like I was once 15 and 16, as we're going to discuss through the eating period here through nutrition, but I haven't worked with anyone that has been a teenager since the CrossFit days when we had like a CrossFit kids class and stuff like that. So this kid purely wants hypertrophy. Like that is his number one objective, and he just wants to get as big and massive as possible. And so I'm kind of excited to do this, and it'll be a unique experience for both of us.
Yeah, that'll be really, really cool. I'm sure you'll share more as he progresses, and especially how fast and stuff like that, which is kind of getting me to my last update. I have officially started a gaining phase.
Nice.
I bastardized one last year, I just prioritized it, and I was super high stress period, and and then I hurt my back and stuff, and I half-assed it, and it showed itself this summer as I reached the same weights I was last summer. It did not look nearly as good. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited for just to have a lot more fuel on the fire to facilitate progress and that sort of thing, and just try and get big again, and just really push quality food and that sort of thing. And with the gym that we will train at back in the States, it's just very, very basic. So I'm writing like a back to basics style program. I'm going to have more barbell work than I normally otherwise would. Just simplify things, lower rep ranges, which it sounds like we're going to talk about more next week, and kind of just go back to some of the kind of directional stuff that I kind of started my lifting journey with. And I'm hoping that I can tap into some of that nostalgia to help drive desire there.
Mm-hmm. So you had mentioned a few episodes ago that you were going to take some of the progression model approach that I've been using in mine. So I assume that that's going to probably happen when you go back to Bali, and not as much with these like barbell basic movements.
No, I will. Like I will leverage that for this program, but some of the compounds and stuff I just won't be able to. Like I'm still going to train like a leg extension, leg curl, for completeness type thing, but it will be kind of my introduction into that, that I will use more for like shortened overload, smaller stuff for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You just can't do that with like most of those lengthened barbell movements.
Yeah. It's just too hard.
Cool. Well, do you want to kick us off with your early teen years of nutrition?
Yeah, let's do it. So kind of the first semblance for me of nutrition was I grew up a very tall, lanky, skinny kid, played basketball. And then at some point I decided I just really wanted to play like football instead of basketball. Well, I played both for a few years, but I decided like I'm going to play, football now. And then kind of ironically with that, I got moved to play tight end, being very tall and skinny, all of a sudden just getting like thrown around by the lineman, because you practice with the lineman pretty much. You might run some receiver drills and stuff, but I realized that like I need to put on fucking weight. So basically I think how we kind of broke it out is like my 15 through like 17, right before my 18th birthday was just a permabulk. Like I just ate anything I could get my hands on. Like I said, I was hanging out with a lineman who, for all intents and purposes, not to sound mean, are just like your overweight teenagers.
Right. Right. They're just big and big boned.
Exactly. Yeah. So I put on 20 pounds every single year through high school. And that was just eating pretty much anything I could get my hands on. And that was kind of that style. Like I knew had some like muscle, some of like the muscle and fitness magazines and that sort of stuff. So I knew like the importance of protein, but I think I told this story before, like super early on in the podcast, but my stepdad, once I got like really into lifting, would come home we had like a local supplement store, and they had this product called Grotein XXL. And it was just like a huge picture of like a gigantic forearm on it. And it came in a 10-pound bucket, like a straight up fucking bucket with a handle.
Yeah.
And he would bring that home and I would have just like 2 of those a day. And I don't even know if I ever like looked at the label to see what was in it.
They had to be like 1,000 calories each.
Had to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would just have those and just eat like everything that I could. And like I said, I put on a lot of weight. I went into my senior year football season at 215 and I entered high school at in the 130s. So like I did a lot of eating, but there was zero structure and I was probably like low 20s body fat sort of thing. But then like by the end of football season, I would lose a fair degree of that just because of so much activity and stuff.
Yeah. My early years were actually the complete opposite. So I started training when I was 15 years old and I was only 5'2" at the time. 5'2" and 135 pounds. So like, that's, I would say that like festively plump. Like I grew out wide before I grew tall. And so like I wasn't a chubby kid, but I had what would be called like baby fat that just hadn't, lengthened out yet. And so there were 2 big impetuses that got me started in training. And one of them was, I've talked about before, this kid at the beach that started training a year before me. And I showed up the next summer and he just looked like he'd been training for a year. He had good response genetically. And so that motivated me to train. But that was also right on the heels of getting in my first and only fight with a kid in school because we were in science class and we were bored and something happened and he called me the Pillsbury Doughboy and I punched him and he threw me to the ground. And in the middle of science class, we threw down. And so that was an impetus for me to start lifting too. But my main objective was to get a 6-pack and be leaner. It was not to get bigger, even though I was this massive dude at 135 pounds. I wanted to be smaller. And so what I found was the 6 meals a day, even portions type thing. And so as a 135 pound kid, man, if I'm eating 6 meals a day, each meal was really small. Like I really remember a meal, like going out for lunch and getting a 1/4 pound of turkey, a 1/4 gallon of skim milk, and some sort of fruit, like it was like a banana or something like that. And so that was literally my lunch, a 1/4 pound of turkey, no bread, a 1/4 gallon of skim milk, and like a piece of fruit. And so that would be kind of consistently what I would eat throughout my 6 meals through the day. And as I did that, and as I lifted weights and played basketball, I began to grow. And eventually I was a skinny-ish kid with a 6-pack who kind of looked like he lifted. And so it was all these like 6 meals a day that kind of got me to this point. But there needed to be a change because I couldn't just continue feeding myself like I was 135 pounds, even though I was now more bone structure, a bigger person, and a larger human in general. So I had to shift kind of away from that 6 meal a day, or at least start eating bigger portions of food during that time.
I'm really kind of admiring is the word that comes to mind, like the actual like fortitude to be able to do that because that you're going to be eating at different times than other people. And that's really impressive at that age, to be completely honest.
Yeah, I brought, so it wasn't in my very first year, but I want to say my second year, I found at the time a company called EAS Sports Nutrition. And they're not really around anymore. I mean, they are, but no one really like buys EAS supplements. The guy that owned the company was Bill Phillips, who was touted as a natural bodybuilder at the time. And he was a marketing genius, basically. And he put out this video in the late 90s called Body of Work, which was the first presentation of the Body for Life Challenge.
That was okay.
So the Body for Life Challenge was a 12 to 16 week period where you basically try to change your body as much as you can through nutrition, taking EAS supplements, and training. And they had a book, Body for Life, that was put out. But Body of Work came out a year before Body for Life was created. It was like the first iteration of Body for Life before, it was marketed in that way and put together as this cute little package. And so I was extremely inspired by that. Like there was a video of these 10 people going through this inaugural transformation challenge and across all age groups. And they all were invited. The top 10 champions in each age group, they're the one top champion in each age group, 10 total people were invited to Golden, Colorado, which is literally like 10 minutes from where I live right now. And they were at EAS headquarters, and they got to do this like filming and talk about their journeys and meet Bill Phillips and the whole EAS team and get like a year of free supplements. And like, to me at 16 years old, I was like, oh my God, like this is amazing. Like I need to do this, So I was so inspired by this that's kind of what I did. Like their main product was Myoplex, which is like a meal replacement thing. I remember this literally explicitly. It was 42 grams of protein, 26 carbs, and 2 grams of fat. And so their advice was 3 Myoplexes a day, 3 even meals a day. And so I couldn't make Myoplexes at school, but I would make one and bring it to school, and I would have one when I got home. So I had 2 Myoplexes each day. And then I had 3 or 4, of these small meals. And so it worked. Like it was certainly probably underfeeding me, which I think is kind of the nature of when you start replacing meals with like 300 calorie meal replacements. Like you're probably going to be underfed for the most part, depending on how big your actual meals are. But what it did is it made sure that I was getting sufficient or even more than sufficient protein, which was probably something I wasn't doing prior to that. And so the inspiration from this whole body of work, body for life challenge, and watching the people and the way that they eat, like I derived so much inspiration from this that was kind of what propelled me in those early years.
I really like that. I think it was an unhealthy, you put male teenagers, American football players in the weight room. It's straight ego in competition sort of thing. And then that was pretty much what eating turned into as well, right? We would see who could eat. Like we had this man, hard walk. It was all you can eat Chinese buffet. And we would go and just eat till I got sick. That was like
MSG, baby.
Oh yeah. Regular occurrence type stuff. But I think that as much as it was, I could probably even say fairly unhealthy, I put on a lot of size through just that permabulk and training as hard as I could sort of thing. I truly do firmly believe that those years were very formative in the amount of size and stuff I have now, especially as, in my what many people consider to be your golden years of mid 20s training. Mine was far from optimal for body composition type stuff. But yeah. So anything else with those high school years you're ready to kind of push through to some college
I'm going to
stuff?
actually, if you don't mind, I'll transition into my next, because I think it transitions from what you said, and then we'll come back to you. So
perfect.
So what you did in your high school years of kind of doing that unhealthy but surplus of calories, just helping you get bigger type thing, that is the approach that I began taking, I would say, toward the end of my senior year of high school and then into college. So I was this skinny kid who was eating these 6 meals a day. And then Paul Carter basically told me in the late 90s online that I was small and was never going to be anything unless I started eating. So that's what I did. I literally, at the time, there was this notion that if you get up in the middle of the night, I don't know if you remember this, but in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was if you get up in the middle of the night and have a big protein carb meal, you're going to spike your insulin, get the MPS signal, all these things. So this was the thing that people were doing. You were setting your alarm for 2 a.m. so you could get up and have a big feeding. And my big feeding was a whey protein shake with whole milk, double scoop. So it was 70 grams of protein there. And then I had 2 massive bowls of grape nuts, which if y'all know anything about grape nuts, it's the most dense, calorically filling carbohydrate cereal that you can possibly eat, right? And I would put raisins in it. So I had this meal at 2 a.m. that was 100 grams of protein and 300 carbs at 2 a.m. And then I would just walk my ass back to bed and go to sleep, which is something I couldn't even imagine doing at this point in my life, getting up and putting that many calories in my body and then just passing right back out again. So I started doing that toward the end of my senior year, and I finally started to gain weight, surprisingly enough. And then that kind of transferred over into college, where I think my experience resembled much more of your high school years, where we had the cafeteria and we had all the high protein but fried food, which sounds like your Chinese buffet. Like it was these, little fried chicken sandwiches that you'd serve yourself, right? And so I would make like a triple stack of the fried chicken sandwich with like a bun and some cheese, and then get like a whole plate of fries and like a piece of pizza. And that would be my meal, like at least once a day, if not twice. And so there was plenty of protein, but there was also like plenty of fat and stuff like that. So that is kind of how I went through college, at least for the first couple of years. And I've referenced this before, but like when I started college, I was around 170 and pretty lean. I have some pictures that maybe, if y'all actually look at my story, I have a sequence on my Instagram story that's called Early Physique, I think. So you can scroll through like some of the pictures of me from my first few years of training and eating. But if you look at like the pictures at the end of high school, I was relatively lean, and I was about 170 pounds. And then in the first 4 or 5 months of college, I went up to 200 pounds. So that means I was gaining 7 or 8 pounds a month in that first semester of college. And that got me up to 200. And that is where literally all of my strength and muscle gains came from. Like everything that I can now look back on and say, like, I am a 200 pound ish guy, like a mid to high 190s guy, and I have, 14% body fat. Like at that point, I was a 200 pound guy at low 20s body fat or something like that, So since that point, like freshman year of college, let's just theoretically assume I was 200 pounds at 22% body fat. And now I'm basically maybe 200 pounds at 15% body fat. So it's like 15 pounds of muscle. Like literally, that is what I've put on over the last 19 years of lifting, has been 15 pounds of muscle. And you can kind of look at that initial period as the period that sparked my initial ascent to 200 pounds and being considered a relatively large human. So yeah, that was kind of like the way that all happened. And that kind of continued through college, along with drinking and going out to eat, and all those things.
I wish I could provide a little bit more with college myself, but I mean, it's crazy to just say, like, I really don't remember. I know there was like zero structure. I weighed less in college than I did finishing up high school, because there was just like, I went to the gym, but I knew I didn't need to eat like that anymore. And I settled in around the like 190s to low 200s through college. Zero structure. I was probably only eating three meals per day max. Probably wasn't even having breakfast. I really, really don't remember. But yeah, unfortunately, I do not have much to add there. But I definitely lost weight than where I was in high school for sure.
Maybe just, mostly food based. Like you maybe not didn't lose muscle, but you just had like maybe excess fat from all that food you were eating during high school.
Yeah, but yeah, not too much there, unfortunately, to provide.
All right. Well, what about post college? Take us there.
Yeah, so I mean, post college is really what I would say was my introduction to CrossFit, right? And what I would say the second reignition of training in like a healthier lifestyle, like in my life. I moved to San Diego within like 2 weeks of graduating college, and was just like found myself immersed in the burgeoning Southern California CrossFit scene, introductions to paleo, really intense training. And that's when I first like added a decent structure of semblance in my diet. I remember one of the simplest things I did was I removed bread. That was like one of my like main things. I was like, okay, I'm paleo-ish. Alcohol became mostly tequila, because that's what everyone did. I started eating a lot of bacon because that's what everyone at the gym did. And I dropped a lot of weight. And I remember that in that first like 6 months, there was one point I stepped on the scale and it was 178 something pounds. And I was like, holy shit. And I was like lean for the first time. I'm now 23 since I was probably like 15. And that was just like a lot of that. And it was really cool to see. I felt really, really good too, with a lot of things, even though alcohol was still regularly intake and stuff. But it was real. That was the first time where I could really see the like the change in physique from nutrition. Because at those younger years, depending on the circles and stuff you run with or the information sources you have, I still thought it was like so much of training, right? If I just train hard enough, like, I'll get shredded sort of thing. And it kind of never happened. It wasn't until I
Mhm.
really started paying attention to nutrition, having a lot of similar meals, because that's where I kind of found in my structure of like realizing I can eat the same food every day and I'm perfectly content doing that, especially when you're providing your own food for yourself. I started doing that. And that's when I got like really lean for the first time and ended up really over skinny for sure, as I was
Mhm.
in like the 179, 180 area.
Yeah, I would say when I went into paleo in the CrossFit days, I kind of had the opposite effect. But we'll get there in a second. I want to backtrack real quick to just post college because I entered corporate America for a few years before we started the CrossFit gym. And so in those years from 2007 to 2009, late 2009, early 2010, I was in corporate America. And I remember the main place we would go for lunches would be Red Robin. And Red Robin is super fatty. I mean, it's amazing. It tastes incredible. But I remember our lunch usually would be either like a double cheeseburger or a double like chicken sandwich of some sort with bottomless fries. And that was the thing that Red Robin was known for, was bottomless fries. You could eat as many as you want. And they had the most incredible ranch dressing. And so so even to backtrack a little further, at the very end of college, I went on my first like diet because we were going on spring break, my super senior year. And so I was like around 200 pounds, and I cut myself down to 182 for this cruise that we went on. And I have pictures. I'm super shredded, and it was probably the most attention in like one small period of time that I got from girls, which was very kind of motivating to be like, oh, look, girls like me at 182 more than they like me at 205. Go figure, And so I have some pictures of me shortly after the cruise where I'm like, 185, 186. And I still use those pictures today to compare to me when I do my photo shoots now, because I'm also 185, 186 in my photo shoots now. And there's this picture from 2006 or 2007 where I'm literally the same weight that I was 3 months ago at the end of my diet. So it's cool to be able to compare those 15 years apart at the same body weight. But needless to say, I got myself down there, got a cool picture that I still use, which is awesome. And then graduated college. And in the first 4 months working corporate America, I went back up to above 200 pounds. So I was like mid 180s. And then it was almost like a replica of freshman year all over again, where I gained this incredible amount of weight in such a short amount of time because of these like corporate lunches. And I remember working out less because I would get home from work and I'd be so tired that half the time I would just push my session to the next day or whatever. And it wasn't until a few months later when Anders and I started doing AM workouts. So we started getting up at 5 a.m. and going to the gym before work. And then I was able to kind of get things back under control at that point because I was working out more regularly. And then when you get up early, it for me at least, it helps me dial in my nutrition throughout the day. Cause I'm like, if I'm fucking getting up at 5 a.m. to work out, like I don't want to do this for naught. So for me, that was more motivating to get my shit back in order. And so I kind of became back to a normal person as far as size goes. I wasn't that ballooned up 200 plus pound version of corporate America, Bryan. And then, I found a balance when I moved out to San Diego, even before we started the CrossFit gym. I remember finding balance where I was like, okay, I'm going to eat crap and I'm going to drink on the weekends. So I'm going to be perfect during the week. And that's this like typical 5 and 2 that you often see, right? 5 days of immaculate eating, 2 days of kind of freedom, but whatever. And so for the most part, I just treaded water and I hung out in like the high 190s for most of that period of time before we started CrossFit, at which point paleo was the thing that was the thing to do. And, I'm sure you have these memories. We've referenced it on the podcast of Anders and I in the gym the first year with our Foreman grill. And basically every meal 3 times a day was 1 pound of meat with guacamole and cheese. And that was literally like that's what we did. Like we just fired up the Foreman, put a pound of meat on there, like take it out of the package and just turn it upside down right on the Foreman and shut the Foreman. Like we didn't even make it into burger patties or anything. You just take a pound and put it on there and close the Foreman, and 5 minutes later it's done, and you throw some guac and cheese on there and you have a fat bomb. And so that's what I did. And actually I gained a bunch of weight during paleo. I thought I was going to lose weight because I'm cutting out carbs and all these things. And lo and behold, look, calories matter, guys. It's not just carbs. So paleo was an interesting experience for me. And because it ballooned me up so quickly, I became an IF proponent. And that happened very soon after the CrossFit days. So I would say early 2012, I started IF, intermittent fasting. And that really took me through until almost 2019. So I have like 7 or 8 years of straight up IF. And as I went through it, I got more and more extreme. So I remember first starting and it was being, a typical 16 and 8. That was what worked for me. And then I remember as I would go, I'd be like, maybe I can do a 6-hour eating window. Okay, maybe I can do a 4-hour eating window. And I would get like very, very, very into this. And I remember even doing periods of time where I would be doing longer fasts. Like this is going to be a 24-hour fast, or this would be a 72-hour fast, and stuff like that. And so that was a lot of the period of time that I was doing CrossFit, which is kind of wild in retrospect, as we now know that CrossFit is a glycolytic sport that's powered by carbs and all these things. And so I didn't perform super well in CrossFit. I was always limited by the energy supply. Not surprisingly enough, I was bad at conditioning work, which you could say is an inherent problem for me, possibly genetic, but also probably related to the fact that I didn't have any carbs coming in. So that was an interesting period of time, and one that I would say if I changed anything in my history, it would 100% be like the dedicated paleo intermittent fasting period of the CrossFit experience.
It's interesting that you say that, because those same years, I would say, like, I guess the later years of that for you, I put in, though, I think the note I have here is, I think these are my worst years considering everything. It was nutrition religion for me, as in paleo plus, drinking on the weekends. Carbs were bad, under fueling. That's when my injuries were always my worst. Two of my 3 surgeries were during those years. And yeah, it was just a lot of under fueling and improper fueling, and then very inconsistent bouts of calories. There wouldn't be a lot of calories throughout the day. And then I would binge on things post training at the end of the night, sort of thing. The weekends were the weekends, and then into Monday were, all hell breaks loose sort of thing. I mean, we'd go to wing night and I would literally see how much I could eat every single Monday.
50, baby. 50 of them.
Yeah. Like that would, all things considered, was like my worst period nutritionally. And I just didn't know, I would say it was that, coupled with the intensity of the training and other poor lifestyle factors, like really led me to what ultimately was like, really just, I don't want to fucking do this shit anymore. So yeah, I would say that's kind of like that was like my age 24 through like 27 sort of thing.
Yeah. So I was definitely, as I'm older than you, so that was probably 6 or 7 years further in my history, but the same time frame of years, I was just older than you were during that time.
Yeah, that's a really good distinction.
Yeah. We have like 5 or 6 minutes left. So I'll quickly just get through basically after the paleo IF period. I dropped paleo quickly. I would say quickly in the grand scheme of things. I would say paleo stopped for me in the mid 2000 teens, like 2014, 2015-ish. And I began eating carbs as kind of the education came around, but I still was doing IF. So that, I think, limited me in many ways, given that I was only getting these 2 protein feedings a day, like a really big, robust protein feeding at night and like a smaller one in the latter afternoon period. So it wasn't until 2019 or 2018 maybe where I finally broke out of the IF. And the reason for that was mostly the evidence-based space here in that we're in right now, with all the education that we have access to, and the understanding that we need to spike MPS every 3 to 5 hours, say, but that still means that you need at least 3 meals a day. Probably 4 is going to be better for most people. And so when I started my diet that I do every year, where I'm basically in a surplus for 8 to 9 months of the year, and then I'm in a deficit 3 to 4 months of the year. When I started doing that, that is when I broke out of paleo, because during those dieting periods, I wanted to make sure that or not of paleo, of IF is what I meant to say. Because when I was doing those dieting periods, I wanted to make sure that I was retaining as much muscle as I could. And I knew that if I was doing that via 2 larger meals a day, that there was going to be a long period of time where I was potentially in a catabolic state. Not to mention that I built my home gym during the pandemic and I began training in the mornings. So it was no longer conducive for me to say, hey, I'll just eat around my training, because I train at 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. at the CrossFit gym or whatever it was. Now I was training in the mornings, so I had to fuel myself in the mornings. And this is for sure, the last 3 years has been the most balanced that my diet has been in my entire existence, aside from maybe those first 3 years when I was doing 6 meals a day, small meals with meal replacement shakes in between meals and things like that. It's now wild to think that 20 years later, it took for me to get back to this balanced place where I'm, eating mostly well and consistently and getting a balance of micro and macronutrients and things like that.
Yeah, that is really funny to think of it. That's where you started, and then more or less, obviously, nothing perfect at those early ages, and then settled back in. I guess for me, post the kind of, I realized that I just didn't want to do CrossFit anymore because I was so beat up. I decided to swap one really strenuous training modality for another, and then got into a secondary powerlifting phase, and embark on another permabulk. Fortunately, I was aware of macros by this point, and was tracking and using MyFitnessPal, but really subscribing to some really kind of just not smart things. I was doing a lot of backloading with Reese's Puff cereal and different things like that.
Yeah.
And that's when I was the biggest I ever was in my life. I was up to 227, which is insane for me to actually sit and think about now. But it was really, I was warm all the time, which was nice. When it was cold, I didn't have to worry about it at all. There was definitely upsides, but it was pretty wild. And the catalyst that changed everything, right? At this point, when I was that big, I'd already been through precision nutrition and I was learning and that sort of thing. But I feel like I didn't quite get it fully yet. And I find this is a phase that a lot of people find themselves in because it's human nature. We want to justify things to ourselves. It's not that bad, blah, blah, blah. It's different when it's me. I get that with certain clients come to me with that. I know what I'm doing, but something's off, something's not right with me sort of thing. And it really means what you're doing on paper, but in practicality that they're not lining up. And because I was that person. So because I was consuming so much nutrition coaching content, because that was, the plan, it was my kind of side business at the time. I had listened to this episode of it wasn't like a podcast, but it was like an interview sort of thing. And it was with Jason Theobald. And he was talking about tracking your blood sugars for insulin resistance, how to know when you've pushed gaining periods too much sort of thing. And I was like, man, this is super interesting. I'm going to order one of these things, right? So I order it, comes in, I prepare, I take my fasted blood sugar and it was a 118. And I was like, oh, fuck me.
You're going to die.
Yeah. I was like, oh, wow, I am nearing close to clinical type 2 diabetes level numbers. So I immediately email him and I'm like, hey, can I sign up for coaching sort of thing? And it was a catalyst. Everything changed after that. I appreciate, Jason so much. He was just a super straight shooter. He was like, okay, blah, blah, blah. And I remember telling him I want to get lean, but I don't want to lose weight because I was really tied to being over 100 kilos. And I remember he said, he was like, listen, you're a natural at 100 kilos. You're like 24% body fat. It doesn't fucking work that way. like you're just, it doesn't work that way. Like you need to drop 20, 30 pounds. And I was like, okay, I bought in, and he just led me through it, and everything changed. Everything changed. And that was right around when I turned 30. And then nothing has ever been the same since. That's when I actually was like, okay, no more bullshit articles, that sort of thing. Like I'm learning the real way things are done. And I really never looked back. And that now is, what I call my like 30 plus post phase for listeners. I'm 34 now. So it's been like 4 full years of this. Periodization, I shifted my entire viewpoint with nutrition to be, health first. And it's become like really, really fun. And I've even like left parts of my old life behind through distance and over time and stuff and that sort of thing. But that is kind of the phase that I find myself in now. I absolutely love it. I have so much fun with it. And it really has given me so much of what my life is now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. It's the catalyst for your career, basically.
It
was
100%.
That experience with Jason and diving deep into the nutrition and all that. So,
yep.
Very cool, man. Very cool.
Cool.
Well, I think that's it. We're out of time.
That is. And we kind of tied it in nicely there. So it sounds like next week we will be talking around a little bit more rep ranges stuff. We will prepare and have a fantastic conversation with that. As always, guys, thank you for listening. Bryan and I will talk to you next week.